So for a long time, the software we use for work functioned basically like, a highly advanced dictionary sitting on your desk.
Right.
You ask it a question, it gives you a synthesized answer, and then you have to actually turn around, face your computer, and, well, do all the manual labor yourself.
Yeah, exactly. You're still the one doing the work.
But imagine if instead of that dictionary, you had an incredibly capable intern sitting right next to you.
Oh, man, that would be nice.
Right? An intern who doesn't just answer your questions, but who literally takes over your keyboard. I mean, they open your files, they write the report, they pull real-time data from your company dashboard.
All the tedious stuff.
Yeah, and then they format the whole thing into your specific corporate template and just hand it back to you for a quick final review.
Which sounds completely wild.
It sounds like a sci-fi pitch. But that is the reality of this massive shift in knowledge work that started, really quietly, on January 12th, 2026.
Yeah, it was a very subtle rollout.
Extremely subtle.
Like, there were no stadium launch events, no massive keynote presentations. It was just this research preview pushed out to users. But the ripple effects have just entirely rewired how we think about human productivity and software interaction.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because today, we're doing a deep dive into Anthropic's Claude Coworker.
It's a huge deal.
And we really need to make it clear right away that this is not just another chatbot update.
No, not at all.
This is the tool that actively takes over folders, workflows, and deliverables on your local machine. Because to really understand where we are now, we have to look at the mechanics of crossing that line, from answering a text prompt to executing a full multi-step workflow.
And that distinction is everything. I mean, what we're seeing with Cowork is the exact same delegate the entire task architecture that completely revolutionized software engineering a couple of years prior.
Right, the coding agents.
Exactly. If you look at coding tools from 2024, developers basically stopped writing individual lines of code. They started acting as reviewers for AI agents that built entire software features.
Just managing the AI, yeah.
Right. But the reason this shift in early 2026 is so profound is that this automation capability has now been aimed squarely at the vast majority of professionals who have never, and frankly will never, open a coding terminal.
Most of us, basically.
Right. It's taking the automation that back-end developers have been hoarding and packaging it for accountants, HR directors, marketing executives, financial analysts.
So let's talk about how this actually functions on your machine, because the interface itself is a huge departure.
Yeah, it's very different.
It doesn't just live in some random browser tab. Cowork sits directly in the Claude desktop app, right alongside the chat and code interfaces. And it has deep systemic access.
Very deep.
It can read, edit, and create files. It opens Microsoft Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook natively.
Yeah.
And if there isn't a direct API integration for a specific app you use, it just opens Chrome and browses the web interface visually.
Like a human would.
Exactly the same way a human would.
And, you really have to think about the technical leap required to do that. When it opens Chrome, it isn't just scraping the underlying HTML text like some old search crawler.
Right.
It is actively using vision models to look at the rendered pixels on your screen.
Wait, so it literally sees what you see?
Yes, it's mapping the document object model and translating its visual understanding of that web page into literal X and Y coordinate clicks.
That is wild.
It sees a button, figures out where that button is in actual physical space on the monitor, and clicks it.
Wow.
Which fundamentally changes the whole workflow paradigm. With a standard chatbot, a human is constantly managing microsteps. You prompt the AI, you copy its output, you paste it into Word, you fix the formatting.
You go back and ask it to rewrite a paragraph.
Exactly. Cowork takes your initial high-level request, plans out an entire multi-step task, shows you that architectural plan, and then it just goes off and executes.
And when you look at the workloads people are adopting first, it's honestly not writing poetry. It's highly tedious, hyper-specific stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
Like 4 main workloads emerged almost instantly in the data. First is digital housekeeping.
Everyone's nightmare.
Right. You point Cowork at a chaotic downloads folder that has like 500 files in it. And because it actually reads the contents of the files using those vision and text models instead of just sorting by the file extension.
Yeah, which never really works.
Right. It can separate your Q3 tax invoices from your personal ebooks, organize them into a clean folder structure, and flag all those annoying duplicate installers for deletion.
Which leads right into the second workload, which is document to deliverable workflows. This
Okay.
is where the real-time savings hit.
For sure.
Instead of a human spending 4 hours assembling pieces of information, you just hand over a completely disorganized set of source files.
Like meeting transcripts and stuff.
Yeah, say transcriptions from 3 different meetings, a rough outline, a financial spreadsheet. You hand it all over, and Cowork structures them into a cohesive draft report. The human's role elevates from doing the manual assembly to just editorial refinement.
Which is huge. And then the third workload is cross-source synthesis. That's asking one really complex question against a massive pile of distinct, disconnected documents and getting back a reviewable, properly cited summary.
A lifesaver for research.
Truly. And the fourth is scheduled recurring work. Think about like a Friday metrics report.
Oh, yeah.
You configure the agent wants to say, every Friday at 3 p.m., pull my regional sales metrics from the Tableau dashboard, cross-reference them with the weekly spend in Excel, and drop the synthesis into my PowerPoint template.
And it just does it.
It just does it. But I do want to challenge the terminology a little bit here. We keep throwing around the word autonomous.
Fair point.
If this agent has to keep pausing to show me its plan and basically wait for my approval before making consequential moves, is it really autonomous?
This is a good question.
To me, it sounds less like an independent worker and a lot more like a highly efficient sous chef. Like, they chop the onions, they prep the garnishes, they might even simmer the sauce, but they literally force you to taste it and nod before they are allowed to plate it for the customer.
That sous chef analogy is spot on. But what's fascinating here is that what you are identifying as a limitation, that constant checking in, is actually a deliberate foundational design choice.
Really. Not a technical limit.
No, it is the absolute cornerstone of enterprise trust. If an AI agent has the systemic power to delete files, overwrite databases, or send outbound emails to your client.
Oh, I see where you're going.
Right, you cannot let it operate with total blind autonomy. The check-ins are a feature, they are not a bug. And that philosophy ties directly into how this tool was built, which honestly operates as a perfect parable for the product itself.
Oh man, the origin story of this thing is wild. So, 4 Anthropic engineers built the initial version of Cowork in just 10 days.
10 days,
Yeah.
which is hard to even comprehend.
Seriously.
But it's not just the speed that's shocking here, it's the mechanism they used to pull it off. Most of the underlying architecture for Cowork was written by Claude Code itself.
Wow. So it was a AI building AI.
It was AI building AI tools for humans. The engineers didn't sit there typing out every single line of Python. They set the architectural goals, delegated the heavy lifting to their own internal agents, reviewed the code those agents produced, and merged it.
So the creation perfectly mirrors the function.
Exactly.
But if this tool is acting as a digital sous chef that can be spun up that quickly, the natural question is whether the broader business world is actually buying into this model.
Right.
Does the math actually make sense for a huge company to completely rip out its old software stack and roll this out? Because the adoption numbers we are looking at are frankly staggering.
We are looking at one of the fastest enterprise adoption curves in software history. Anthropic's enterprise AI assistant market share jumped from 18% in 2024 to 29% in 2025.
That is a massive leap for enterprise software.
And by early 2026, over 500 organizations were paying them north of $1 million per year. To contextualize that, Anthropic's annualized revenue scaled from roughly $1 billion at the end of 2024 to about $14 billion by February 2026.
Okay, a 14x revenue jump in a little over a year. That is just insane.
Unprecedented.
And it wasn't just, Silicon Valley early adopters doing this. You've got Cognizant deploying it across 350,000 staff members. Accenture training 30,000 people on it.
Massive global scale.
Yeah, 70% of the Fortune 100 are using it in some capacity. But there's this one specific data point from Epic Systems, the company behind the MyChart medical software, that perfectly illustrates the pent-up demand for this.
I love this example.
Right, even before Cowork launched, when Anthropic only offered Claude Code, which is a tool explicitly built, marketed, and designed for programmers, over half of the internal usage at Epic Systems was coming from non-developer roles.
You had accountants, HR directors, project managers actively hacking their way into a highly technical coding environment.
Just to use the AI.
Just to get access to that agentic, execute the whole task for me capability. The workforce was demanding the automation before the UI even existed for them.
Which brings us to a massive tension point in the data. The reality check on return on investment or ROI.
Let's talk about the numbers.
When you survey the early users, they consistently report an average 12x speedup on comparable tasks.
12x.
They claim they are taking tasks that used to take basically 4 hours, 3.8 hours, and finishing them in 14.8 minutes. I have to push back on that.
It sounds too good to be true.
Because if someone tells me they just did 4 hours of corporate work in 15 minutes, what kind of work are they actually doing? That sounds like a highly constrained, isolated task, not a real representation of a whole job.
Well, it is a vital distinction, and the independent research absolutely validates your skepticism here.
Okay, good.
Neutral enterprise case studies place the real-world productivity gains much more conservatively. They put it somewhere in the 26% to 55% range, which depends heavily on the specific task and the user's experience level.
So how do we reconcile those two numbers? Like a 12x speed up versus a 26% gain. Those are light years apart.
They are both statistically true. They are just measuring completely different scopes of work.
Okay, walk me through that.
So a few very specific, highly repetitive tasks, like taking 20 distinct PDF contracts, extracting specific liability clauses, and formatting them into an Excel sheet, those really do see transformative 12x speedups.
Because a human takes 4 hours just to read and copy paste.
Exactly, whereas the agent takes seconds. But when you average that out across all the messy, unpredictable, varied work a professional does in a standard 40-hour week.
The meetings, the strategy, dealing with office politics.
Exactly, the nuanced decision-making. When you blend all that, the overall gain is a solid, unglamorous 26 to 55% bump.
Which, to be completely fair, is still a massive competitive advantage.
Oh, it absolutely is. But the accounting gets far more complex when chief financial officers start looking at the actual bill.
The dreaded bill.
If you only look at the cost of the software seat license, the flat monthly subscription fee, the ROI looks incredibly high, around 2.5x to 3.5x. But you have to factor in the mechanics of how these agents actually operate. We call it agentic compute costs.
Let's break that down because I think it's super important. Why does an agent cost so much more to run than a standard chatbot?
Well, a standard chatbot takes your prompt, generates a response token by token, and then stops. It's one API call.
Simple enough.
But an agent operates in recursive loops.
Yeah.
It writes a plan, it executes step one, it queries the system to see if step one worked, it reads the result. If it made an error, it formulates a correction, executes that, and checks again.
So it's constantly talking to itself.
Right. It might ping the underlying server 30 or 40 times just to complete one single user request.
Oh, wow.
That compute cost is astronomical compared to a single prompt. And on top of that, you have enterprise integration costs. You don't just download Cowork and suddenly it magically understands your company's 10-year-old on-premise database.
Right, you need developers for that.
You have to build custom API bridges, conduct deep security vetting, map all your internal access permissions. Once you bake in the compute burn and that integration friction, the real-world headline ROI compresses down to about 1.6x.
And obviously, a 1.66 ROI is exactly why these multi-million-dollar contracts are getting signed. But here's where it gets really interesting. That proven, scalable return on investment is basically the scent of blood in the water.
Oh yeah, it kicked off a war.
It has triggered an incredibly intense and complicated arms race among the tech giants to control the enterprise agent space.
We are looking at a very crowded field. Google pushed out Gemini agent mode directly tied to Google Workspace. OpenAI has Operator running dynamically in the browser, and Microsoft launched Copilot Cowork, deeply embedded inside the customer's Microsoft 365 tenant.
But none of this happens without a massive technological threshold being crossed. The underlying capability leap is what made this sudden explosion possible, right?
Absolutely.
In February 2026, Anthropic released Claude Opus 4.6. They run this benchmark called the long context needle in a haystack test. Basically, you hide one specific obscure fact in a mountain of text and see if the AI can retrieve it.
A classic test.
The previous generation model scored an 18.5% accuracy rate. Opus 4.6 jumped to 76%.
Huge leap.
And on the Alice World benchmark, which tests actual computer use performance, it leaped from under 15% to 72.5% in a single generation.
And we really should explain what Osworld actually measures because it isn't just a basic coding test.
Right, it's different.
Osworld simulates real-world desktop environments. It tests whether an AI can handle dynamic, unpredictable interfaces. If an agent is trying to submit a form and a random software update pop-up suddenly blocks the submit button.
Which happens to all of us.
Constantly. A rigid script will just fail. It doesn't know what to do. But Opus 4.6 has the visual reasoning to actually see the pop-up, understand it's an obstruction, click the X to close it, and then return to the primary task.
That is incredible.
Hitting that 72.5% reliability threshold is the whole ballgame. Without that level of dynamic reasoning, an agent clicking around your desktop is just a massive liability.
Well, and because Anthropic hit that threshold first and established that reliability, it created this bizarre, almost contradictory dynamic with Microsoft.
It's so funny.
Because Microsoft has their own massive AI investments. They're building Gemini and GPT competitors into their own stack. But for Copilot Cowork, Microsoft is actually licensing Claude's engine to power it.
Which is wild when you think about it.
I mean, it's like if Ford spent billions developing their own proprietary agents, right?
Yeah.
But then they realized a Chevy engine was just fundamentally better for pulling heavy commercial trailers.
Yeah.
So Ford quietly drops the Chevy engine into the new Super Duty truck just to ensure the commercial customer doesn't drive over to the Chevy dealership.
It is the ultimate example of co-opetition.
Co-opetition, yeah.
We are looking at a highly fragmented ecosystem right now. Enterprises are staring at this landscape and aggressively refusing to make an architectural bet on just one vendor's agent layer.
They want the best of both worlds.
Exactly. They want the absolute best reasoning engine for the specific task at hand, but they want it running safely inside their existing Microsoft or Google governance walls. Multi-vendor hedging is the new norm.
Makes sense.
Companies are perfectly happy to run an Anthropic cognitive engine inside a Microsoft security environment if it means the work gets done 20% faster.
But, patching all these different cognitive engines, legacy environments, and security walls together creates severe friction.
It's not seamless.
Delegating your workflow to an AI isn't foolproof, and the failure modes for an autonomous agent are fundamentally different and much more dangerous than when a standard chatbot hallucinates a bad answer.
The stakes are incredibly high now. The first major risk we are seeing is action hallucination.
Which honestly is terrifying. Like, think about the mechanics of a normal hallucination. I use a language model to draft a speech, and it makes up a quote that Abraham Lincoln never said.
Annoying, but fixable.
Right, it's annoying, but I can fact-check it. An action hallucination is an entirely different beast. This is when there is a state mismatch between the AI's internal memory and the actual state of your operating system.
Yeah, this is where it gets scary.
The model forms a plan to move a sensitive folder. It sends the command. A silent bug or a permissions error prevents the folder from actually moving. But the model assumes the command worked, and it reports back to you, yes, I moved the financial records to the public drive.
It is actively, confidently deceiving the user about the physical state of their own computer.
Which is a disaster.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, that ties directly back to why the human-in-the-loop requirement isn't just legal cover for the tech companies.
It's not just a terms of service thing.
No, it is a foundational safety necessity. You cannot deploy an agent with the power to execute irreversible actions, whether that's a mass file deletion, a financial wire transfer, or a mass email blast, without a human verifying that the action needs to happen and then independently confirming through the UI that it actually did happen.
Beyond hallucinations, you also have a fundamental limitation with latency, right?
Right, because Cowork relies so heavily on visually parsing a screen to know where to click, literally looking at the pixels to find the search bar. It is fundamentally structurally slower than a native API call.
Right.
When two machines talk directly to each other via code, it happens in milliseconds.
Mm-hmm.
But an agent has to capture the screen, run it through a vision model, reason about the layout, map the coordinates, and then act.
It takes time.
It operates at human speed, sometimes even slower. It is not built for tasks requiring instantaneous execution.
And then you have what enterprise IT departments are calling governance lag, which sounds boring, but is a huge deal.
It's a massive headache.
If you are in a highly regulated industry like banking or healthcare, compliance is everything. But as of mid-2026, a lot of this agentic activity isn't fully or cleanly captured in enterprise audit logs.
Which is terrifying for an auditor.
Yeah. If a compliance auditor comes in and asks, who modified this patient file at 3 a.m., the system log might just show the human user's name because the AI was impersonating them. it doesn't clearly delineate that an autonomous agent executed the change on behalf of a sleeping employee.
And we see this pattern repeat in every tech cycle.
Do we?
Oh, absolutely. Governance features the granular audit logs, the role-based access controls, the spend limits. They always arrive a cycle behind the shiny new capabilities.
Ship first, ask questions later.
Exactly. The tool ships, adoption explodes, the workforce gets addicted to the productivity, and then the enterprise admins have to scramble to bolt the safety rails on after real-world usage exposes the glaring security gaps.
And if an enterprise realizes their audit logs are failing because they've wired this single black box agent into their entire tech stack, their Slack, their Google Drive, their internal HR database, suddenly they're staring down a massive architectural trap.
You are entirely at the mercy of one vendor's infrastructure and upgrade cycles.
So what does this all mean? Zooming out from the software bugs, the compute costs, and the boardroom licensing deals. We have to ask the ultimate question.
The big one.
What does this macroeconomic shift mean for the human workforce? Because if we are automating 25% to 50% of the daily workflow, are we looking at mass labor displacement?
Let's look at the data from Anthropic's own economic index because it paints a very specific picture of how work is evolving right now.
Okay.
First, usage is rapidly diversifying. Between November 2025 and February 2026, the top 10 most common tasks performed by Claude fell from 24% of all usage to 19%.
Meaning it isn't just isolated to coding or drafting generic emails anymore.
Right. It is spreading out into the niche, idiosyncratic tasks of everyday jobs. Furthermore, the index shows that 49% of all jobs have now seen at least a quarter of their tasks performed using Claude at some point.
Which requires us to really think critically about our own departments.
Absolutely.
Because if almost half of all jobs are already outsourcing a quarter of their tasks to an AI agent, the logical assumption is that the floor is about to fall out of the labor market.
Right. That's the fear.
If I can do my job in 25% less time, my company doesn't need 25% of my department.
That is the logical fear, but the timeline tells a different story right now. The data currently shows broadening, deepening adoption without a corresponding displacement shock.
At least not yet.
Right. Now, Anthropic's economics lead claims there is no evidence of widespread labor market displacement yet, but we have to view that with a critical eye as they are selling the product.
Yeah.
But independent economic data hasn't shown a massive spike in white-collar unemployment either. The projections suggest that 2027 to 2028 is the window where cowork-style agents shift from an edge case advantage to the default way work gets done.
So we have a little time.
This perfectly mirrors the 2-year adoption curve we tracked with Claude Code in engineering. It basically takes about 2 years to go from a pilot program to daily habitual reliance.
And when that reliance sets in, the real defensive moat for these AI companies won't just be who has the smartest base model, will it? It will be the plug-in marketplace.
Oh, that's where the real lock-in happens. Think about the mechanics of that. A top-tier law firm takes its proprietary, highly nuanced M&A due diligence process.
Their formatting rules, specific risk thresholds.
Exactly, their operational standard operating procedures. And they encode all of that institutional brainpower into a custom cowork plugin. They aren't just buying AI, they are building their specific company culture into the agent's architecture.
Wow. And once a company does that, the switching costs become astronomically high.
You can't just rip that out and move to Google Gemini without losing your institutional memory.
Right. So the real test over the next 12 to 18 months is whether this technology stays consigned to the work around the work.
That's the key phrase.
Because currently we are outsourcing the project updates, the research sprints, the formatting of slide decks. The major shift happens if or really when the AI starts taking over core task ownership.
And we have traveled from a quiet 10-day engineering experiment to a $14 billion enterprise revolution so incredibly fast.
Blistering speed.
We are all essentially managing digital sous chefs now, navigating this incredibly complex landscape of 1.6x real-world ROIs, action hallucinations, and this massive web of tech giant co-opetition.
But as we transition into this new default way of working, there is a crucial detail buried in the research that we need to highlight before we go.
Yeah, this is a big one.
The data consistently shows that the largest productivity gains from these agents are going to already experienced users, not the novices.
Because the veterans already know what good work looks like. They possess the judgment required to review the sous chef sauce, to go back to that analogy.
Right.
They know when the agent's draft is brilliant, and they know exactly when it's subtly flawed.
So I want to leave you with this final puzzle to mull over as you look at your own workflows.
It's a tough one.
If AI makes the veterans infinitely faster by taking over all the grunt work, the document synthesis, the tedious digital housekeeping, the messy initial drafting, how does the next generation of workers ever get the entry-level reps they need to become veterans?
Right. Do you even know how to review the work if you've never had to suffer through doing it from scratch?
Exactly. If the bottom rungs of the career ladder are completely automated away by agents, how do you climb?
It's something every industry is going to have to figure out.
Thank you all so much for joining us on this deep dive. Before you log off today, take a look at your own chaotic downloads folder, look at your recurring Friday reporting templates, and ask yourself, are you ready to hand over the keys? We'll see you next time.